You're listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by NACS. We'll talk about what we see at stores and what the future may hold for our industry.
Credit card swipe fees cost the average American family more than $1,000 a year, every year. But that may soon change, as both the U.S. Senate and U.S. House of Representatives have dropped bipartisan bills to fix the broken credit card system. NACS has played a big role in getting those bills introduced, and we're going to talk about what it means for you and what you can do about it. Joining us today on Convenience Matters is Doug Kantor. He is General Counsel with NACS and has been instrumental with the NACS team in getting these bills introduced. So first off, welcome, Doug.
Thanks for having me.
So we've talked about credit card fees in the past. Can you basically set up what's the problem here that we're trying to solve that really would provide a relief to American families?
The problem here is pretty straightforward. Each of us gets a credit card from a financial institution, a bank, maybe a credit union, but Visa and MasterCard play this odd role where they tell the bank or the credit union, by the way, here's the prices you're going to charge the retailer for accepting that card. What happens from that is all of these banks, even the largest ones, JP Morgan Chase, Citibank, Bank of America, you name it, charge the same prices. It looks an awful lot like what we see happening with OPEC on oil. You've got a central actor saying, no, here's the price we want. And everyone says, great, we like that too. And the result, obviously, is prices that are much higher than would happen in a different situation, like the competitive markets that retailers have to participate in all the time. So these fees have grown dramatically out of control. And there's part of the problem is there's no price cues or market forces to change them, right? Because as consumers, we take our card around, we buy things, and it looks like it's free. It's not. We're all paying the money. It's just hidden. So somehow we've got to solve those problems.
And we solved those problems related to debit fees about a little bit more than a decade ago with the Durbin Amendment. And that basically shows, while it wasn't perfect, it shows that it can be done. And rewards didn't go away. Security didn't go away. None of these things that were Chicken Little expressions by the financial community happened. In fact, nothing bad happened. Only good things happened. But still, the fear factor is still out there, and they're spreading all these nightmare scenarios of what would happen. And like I said, with debit cards, it didn't happen. So anything that you want to share related to the debit experience that really links to this one?
Well, yeah, a couple of things. One is that what's being considered on credit cards is different in a fundamental way than what happened on debit cards, and is much less invasive from the financial industry's point of view. So on debit cards, the Federal Reserve was given the ability to actually regulate the amount of the fee, and they did that. And it reduced it by about half, give or take. There was a second part of that said, oh, hey, there should be two networks on debit cards so that there's competition. The whole debate and what people really complained about and said led to all kinds of bad things that you mentioned, Jeff, was the bank saying, oh no, the Fed regulating this fee will lead to all these bad things. People basically ignored that there was this second appendage in that legislation that said, oh yeah, and have two networks so that there's some competition there. Well, the credit card legislation that was just introduced recently on a bipartisan basis only does the second appendage part to credit cards. And it says, fine, just have two networks that compete The retailer gets to choose which of the two networks. And then there'll be a little bit of market competition. People will have to think about whether they gain or lose market share when they set prices. All will be well in the world. We don't need to regulate fees at all. It should be a compromise position that the financial institutions like. But of course, you can't kill Chicken Little that easily. He's back out there saying the sky is falling.
So that brings us to the bill itself. And when we talk to retailers, whether it's various committees that come to town or other conversations we have, credit card fees are way up there in terms of top concerns, costing the industry roughly $20 billion a year. Staggering increases, something along the lines of 40% in the last year or so. They're just going up. And when you talk about competition means the most innovative idea, the most attractive idea for the customer wins. In our space, convenience. However you define convenience, through the customer's eyes, the ones who deliver that convenience concept better than someone else probably gets a business, deservedly so. That's not the case with swipe fees or interchange fees. So take us through this bill getting introduced. As you mentioned, it was bipartisan. And here's another word for you political junkies, bicameral, which I guess means both the House and Senate at the same time or within close proximity. So this is a little different than some other bills that may just kind of flash up in the sky and disappear like a firecracker. This has a little bit more staying power.
That's right. We think this bill has a real chance to become law. And we've got more co-sponsors than in the last Congress. So on the Senate side, Richard Durbin, Roger Marshall, Peter Welch, and J.D. Vance. So now 4 leads on the bill, 2 from each political party. And on the House side, Lance Gooden, Zoe Lofgren, Jeff Van Drew, Tom Tiffany, more heavily weighted Republican on the House side. And that's the way the House obviously is weighted, and majorities mean a lot more over there in the House. But it shows there's real support across a very broad, diverse political spectrum for this legislation. And we're going to keep building on it from there and see when and where we can get this passed, because what we find is no matter the political persuasion, overwhelmingly, when you explain what's going on, people say, well, that's not right. We should do something about that. So this is the opportunity. Now there's legislation. It's got a lot of support. All you have to do is make that become law, and we've actually done something about it.
Well, let's do something about that. And I think first, you live and breathe this every day, politics. But for those who may not be familiar, we talk a lot about co-sponsors. We have a lot of co-sponsors on this bill, and there's an opportunity to add more co-sponsors. Why are co-sponsors important?
So there's a couple of different aspects of that. One is just it commits those members, right? It's clear, oh, they support the bill, those votes will be there, all those sorts of things. But the second reason why it's important is it's a very public signal. It shows to other members of Congress and to the public, hey, this is the type of support the bill has, not just numbers per se, but as I mentioned in this specific case, very different kinds of members with different politics. I mean, if you look at it, for example, Richard Durbin is in the Democratic leadership in the Senate, has been for a long time, is sort of a liberal stalwart in the United States Senate. On the other hand, Roger Marshall, who's been doing this with him now for about a year, is a conservative and very much a champion of the conservative wing of the Republican Party. You could call him a populist, and his leading the charge really tells Republicans and conservatives, oh no, this isn't just a liberal bill. This is very much a conservative bill, and we find that we get huge support in polling across the political spectrum. And so these members really represent things. They represent constituencies. And so by putting their brand on it, if you will, by co-sponsoring, they show that that part of the political world should be supportive of this.
The bills were both dropped in early June, June 7th, I believe. What are the next steps? Looking to attach more co-sponsors, or what is the process to go from, take us to like, what was it, how a bill becomes law?
Right, exactly. We can go back to Schoolhouse Rock days. I can't do it as well as the bill sitting on the steps of the Capitol did. But in this case, there will be a few things that will happen along the way. There's likely to be at least one congressional committee that has a hearing, most likely more than one. There was one last year as well, but we expect more of those to look into the issue, talk about the bill, explore the problem, and allow Congress to get testimony from witnesses on it. We are adding more co-sponsors and continuing to build support. You could see, letters and lobby days and all those sorts of things. And then there's a big procedural question, right? There's different ways bills make it to become a law. Sometimes they go through a committee and get voted on, go through either the House or the Senate, then get sent over to the other body, do the whole thing over again, and get reconciled to a final bill. More often, frankly, in the modern Congress, because there are so few things that everybody agrees upon, there tend to be these moments when a big bill passes. So the debt ceiling thing, an appropriations spending bill to fund the government for another year, the annual defense bill. There are sort of these big moments. This year there will be a farm bill. Often what happens is bills like this one get added into the language or added as an amendment to these larger bills, and that's when actually they get considered and become law. And that's just a byproduct of a little bit of gumming up of the legislative works over the years since we were kids eating cereal, watching Schoolhouse Rock.
And that's exactly what happened with the Dermott Amendment. That was an amendment that was part of the broader law that was addressing the financial crisis of the day. So is there a ticking clock on this? Is there a time frame that we're up against? There's momentum in getting a bill introduced. Is it something where the other side just wants to play out the clock because there is a ticking clock on this?
To some extent, but I think we have a lot of time this Congress, because this Congress runs not only through the rest of 2023, but through 2024. The bill remains live that whole time. These members of Congress will all be there without an intervening election until November of 2024. So that, in a lot of ways, is the clock, is the standard Congress. And yes, there's no doubt there's a couple things that the credit card industry wants to do in this situation, and frankly, in any situation on these types of things, is yes, running out the clock is good for them, so they try to run out the clock. The other thing they try to do is just muddy the waters. They'll throw anything out there to make it seem more complicated than it is. I mean, to us, it's pretty simple. They're setting prices in a way they should not be setting prices. We need actual price competition. Let's go do that. But they will throw out there, as you mentioned with respect to the debit scenario years ago, at that time, they threw out everything from, oh my God, banks will go out of business and fail because of this, to, oh, you'll hurt the smaller banks and help the bigger banks, and everybody will have to pay more for their checking accounts, on and on and on. As you pointed out, none of those things actually happened, but it didn't stop them from saying them. They're doing the same things now. They're saying, oh my God, this will create security problems and everyone will lose their rewards and have to curl up in a ball and cry because they don't have airline miles anymore. None of that's true either, but they feel like they have to say something.
And none of that's true because that exists in Canada and in Europe, in other highly advanced countries. There is much lower swipe fees, and none of these nightmare scenarios that are thrown out there exist.
That's exactly right. It's really, there's a whole bunch of detail you can point to on this, but the cleanest, simplest answer is we have by far the highest swipe fees in the industrialized world in the United States, more than Canada, more than Europe, you name it. You could go around the world to places you think, boy, I'm surprised they have credit cards at all. Our fees are higher. And yes, they do have credit cards. Many of those places have regulated, cut the fees, capped the fees, done all kinds of things. What is common to those other places is they have much lower fees and they still have credit cards. Credit cards still work. They're not broken. People get rewards. The whole system acts, just very similar to the way it is here. It's just that we pay a ton more for the same thing.
So we know that you and the NACS team and all kinds of other teams that are committed to retail have taken up this cause. It is the top, if not among the top issue for a whole bunch of different retail groups and a whole bunch of others out there. What can members or retailers do to affect change in this process?
This is really, really important, and I'm glad you brought it up, because one thing we face here is the credit card industry has a huge amount of money to spend to try to muddy the waters and fight anything from happening to create reform in this area. And they're not shy about spending it. We've seen lots of advertising, even just this week, throwing the proverbial spaghetti at the wall. The thing that our industry has, and retail generally, and we do work with all kinds of other retail sectors on this issue to try to get something done, is we've got lots and lots of little businesses and lots of people working in the industry. That's our advantage. We don't have the resources, we have the people. And so what's really important is for people in convenience store businesses, whether that's the CEO, whether that's a store manager, whether that's anybody above or below either of those positions, is let your member of Congress know how important this is and that you need some reform. So that's sending them an email, calling their office, going to see them in their district office when they're back home, coming to Washington to see them, writing a letter to the editor of the local paper or an opinion column in your local paper. All of those kinds of things are tremendously important to showing support. Frankly, look, you can even just send out messages on Twitter and Facebook and those kinds of things, parroting what NACS has said or our coalition, the Merchants Payments Coalition, has said. It's just creating that noise so that members of Congress see it, hear it, and say, oh yeah, this does matter to a lot of people. You may be interested to know that the credit card industry has started a new organization that is supposedly consumers to protect your credit cards, completely made up on the consumer side, but they are trying to create that noise out of nothing to oppose it we have to create that noise where it's real and legitimate from real people saying, no, this really does matter to me.
And the whole idea of muddying things is because if it becomes too difficult or too difficult to figure out what's what, the easiest thing is to walk away. And the easiest thing is not the right thing on this. So when we talk about what members can do, we have if you go to the NACS website, there's forms there. You can send it 10 seconds, 20 seconds, whatever it takes, fill out your information, automated, goes to your members of Congress. Now that's one way where they literally count the number of things they get. And that's important. But just as important, if not more important, is the story and the face that goes along with that simple count. And finding out your members of Congress, just writing something heartfelt, or saying, as you said, when there's a moment to say hi to the specific congressperson or senator or their aides, they pay attention to this because their job is to represent the interests of their constituency. And make your voice heard, tell that story. Stories are incredibly important in this process.
That's right. What I tell people is if you just once a day do one thing on this topic, we will win this. And that could be sending an email through the NACS grassroots portal, calling one of these offices, telling one of your colleagues at work, hey, will you send an email today? Hey, will you make a call today? Like I said, writing those letters to the editor, you name it. But one thing a day, which could only take, 5 minutes, something like that, that would be an overwhelming tidal wave of support. And we would definitely win if folks in our industry all did that.
And this is something that costs the industry $20 billion a year. It is something that is important. So we've talked about for members what they can do. You can go to convenience.org and go to the government relations tab there under topics, and that's one, or advocacy. Those are two ways to find it. Doug, where else can somebody find out more about how to contact their congressional or Senate representatives?
They can also go to the Merchants Payments Coalition website, merchantspaymentscoalition.com, and there's a Contact Congress tab on that coalition's website as well. And just like the NACS website, it'll give you a suggestion. Hey, here's a message you can send your member of Congress. You can edit that and make it say whatever you want, but we're trying to help out, make it easy for you. So it's only a couple minutes to get that done. But you can go through either of those ways. And you can always contact the NACS government relations team if you're interested in, for example, writing an article. We'll help you do it. Let us know. We love hearing from folks to try to get the word out.
And just to reiterate what you said, if everyone does something, we will win this.
That's right.
Well, looking forward to having more discussions on how we advance this forward and ultimately win this. So thank you once again for joining us today, Doug. And thank you all for listening to Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.